Hi, everyone. There's so many interesting opinions about spiritual teachers and money. And what I'd like to point out is that a being who is fully liberated, fully awake, and I can't really think of any modern spiritual teachers that have any fame. I'm sure there are plenty of teachers we haven't heard of who are. And one telltale sign is, do they charge money or not? So here's why that's a telltale sign. So enlightenment is about liberation from what's called samsara. And also, simultaneously, that samsara, the cycles of birth, death, rebirth, and being locked into illusion, is simultaneously recognized as the ego. That samsara is actually just an expression of the ego, which is a completely insane, delusional, masochistic thought system. Okay. And so what enlightenment is finding liberation. And you can really look at it from both angles, but they end up being the same. One is from, you know, lifetime after lifetime of misery and suffering and rebirth. And the other being liberation from an insane, delusional torturer, AKA the ego. So that's the goal. That's the final goal that is being pointed to, and that a guru or a real spiritual teacher will lead someone to. So, a very simple way to say this is to help someone find freedom from misery, not from pain, not even from suffering, but just absolute misery. You know, the Buddha talked that life is on fire, that while we don't recognize it, all around us and even inside of us, there is suffering, 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 and lifetime after lifetime of suffering and dissatisfaction. So that's what a spiritual teacher is here to do, is to lift someone out of misery. So imagine that you are in a house that's on fire. And let's say you make it out of the house. Are you going to stand at the entryway to that and deny people exit from misery, from suffering until they pay you a fee? No, you do everything in your power to pull people out, everything you can to help. Second of all, the idea that enlightenment can be bought is absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. That it could be that it's a service, that it's an exchange, that it's anything involving anything material. It's completely ridiculous. And so that's why I distinguish between a guru and a spiritual teacher. A guru is a being who is completely liberated, and all they care about is liberating other people. Mostly what we have out here today are spiritual teachers who have made it a couple of rooms out of the burning house, but aren't all the way out yet. And not being all the way out, they still have attachments and still don't have a full understanding of reality, of ego, of enlightenment, of suffering. And that's why you have teachers who like Osho, who had like 80 Rolls Royces, well, you have teachers behaving in ridiculous, absurd ways because they're not all the way out of the burning house yet. So keep in mind the ego is insanity. It's the ultimate form of insanity. So what you have with most teachers is someone who is still partially insane and either doesn't recognize it themselves, many of whom think they're enlightened, which is just, it's kind of like the ego's last ploy. Like, oh, you're done. And we get so confused in with spiritual truth because ultimately all of us are already awake and enlightened. But that doesn't mean we're done. There's a process. that has to do with a re-education of the mind. And yeah. So that's not to say that spiritual teachers shouldn't charge money, but the idea that it can lead to enlightenment, and anything more than making a a livable wage as a spiritual teacher is just utterly and completely absurd and should be an ultimate red flag. Like, there are teachers out there who are charging $8, $9, $1,000 a day for various seminars. Absolute red flag. Like, no way that's a liberated person. Not possible. I know one very famous spiritual teacher, and this person charges $1,500 an hour to do consults with people via Skype. So all of this is based around two forms of insanity. One is any teacher that's charging something like that isn't actually fully free. Because again, someone who's made it all the way out of the burning house, all they care about is rescuing other people. Secondly, it's absurd, the thought that money can buy enlightenment. And of course, it's, this idea is alive and well in the West, and a very capitalistic, crazy, and spiritually naive culture. We're a very spiritually naive culture. So there you go. If you see anyone charging money to let people exit a burning house, you can be very clear that they're not liberated.